So just a few days ago, the Trump administration designated the Houthis in Yemen as foreign terrorist organizations, and this is from the UN. That designation risks expediting large-scale famine in Yemen, speakers warn Security Council. And again, others have described the humanitarian crisis that's happening right now and has been happening in Yemen as one of the worst since the World War II era. So things are already very, very dire there, and the U.S. State Department, the U.S. government labeling the Houthis as terrorists is only going to exacerbate this, and just another example in the countless of how the United States government is the biggest purveyor of violence and destruction in the world. MLK talked about that in the 60s, and unfortunately it's still true now, with some very, very disastrous consequences for the people in Yemen. And again, it needs to be pointed out, the United States, Saudi Arabia, UAE, their other partners in this fight against the Houthis in Yemen, which I think control about 80% of the territory in Yemen. So they are more or less the functioning government at this point, and the U.S. just designated them as a foreign terrorist organization when all they are doing is fighting against imperialism, fighting against these outside forces, trying to defend themselves, defend their people, and then they're being met with just these hugely disastrous consequences. It's disgusting, and also needs to be pointed out, these same forces are the U.S., Saudi Arabia, UAE, have cut deals with Al-Qaeda in Yemen. Military alliance battling Houthi rebels negotiated secret deals and recruited Al-Qaeda fighters, AP reports. This is from Al Jazeera, I believe, in 2018, and which frankly isn't very surprising because Saudi Arabia in particular, and the kind of extremist form of Wahhabism that comes from that, led to the creation of Al-Qaeda. And so it's not a huge surprise that Al-Qaeda is fighting against the Houthis in this case. And just really, again, I wish I was surprised that the U.S. government and the Trump administration did this, especially you add in the pandemic, which, is going to make this designation even worse for the country, but it's disgusting. That is extremely United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Mark Griffiths, said he is extremely concerned about the impact of the U.S.'s decision to designate Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, as foreign terrorist organization, which is liable to have a chilling effect on his effort to bring the parties together. And I will link to this very interesting and insightful video from the Gray Zone. Anya Parampil interviewed Rune Agerhus, General Director of the Yemen Solidarity Council, about this decision, and he gives a really good just primer on how the Houthis originated. I believe Ansar Allah was the name of this member of the Yemeni parliament, and then he started, once he was out of parliament, he kind of developed his political ideology and then ended up being murdered by one of the leaders in Yemen, and just kind of really a good primer course about what's going on in there, and then just a little bit about a backstory on Ansar Allah, or the Houthis. Highly recommend checking that. I'll link it down below. Let's see. The most urgent priority in Yemen right now is to prevent a massive famine. And again, this designation is going to make this famine exponentially worse, because that organization, the Yemen Solidarity Council, they were doing work within the U.S. to try to help out the people in Yemen, the Houthis, just people in general, and they aren't able to do that anymore because of this terrorist designation, because they could potentially be seen as, aiding and abetting terrorists and face really extreme repression from the U.S. government as a result. So it's going to curtail humanitarian efforts in the region and add to the famine that's already going on there. It's disgusting and despicable on every level. 16 million Yemenis are poised to go hungry this year, and about 550,000 already find themselves in the midst of a small famine. He said, every decision the world makes right now must take this into account, noting that the U.S.'s decision to designate Ansar as a foreign terrorist organization will take effect on January 17th. He summarized the reasons why humanitarian actors oppose such a development, including the fact that Yemen imports 90% of its food, with nearly all that food entering through the commercial channels that aid agencies cannot replace. Already, Yemenis